Hello, everyone. This talk for Friday, the 25th of September, and continuing the story of Esther. And today I take two chapters, chapters 5 and 6. Esther, having had the 3 days of prayer and fasting, eventually goes and stands before the king. An incredibly dangerous thing to do, because the law of the Medes and the Persians is that you only come to the king when he summons you. If you go and stand and make yourself visible and he takes exception to that, it's quite simple. It's off with your head. So she takes a tremendous risk. There is the slim chance that the king will be favorable, and if he extends the royal scepter, then you can go in. So after 3 days of prayer and fasting, and Esther saying, if it's to be that the king will bring me in, then so be it. If it's to be the king will kill me, then so be it. At least I've tried, having based all of this on prayer. Esther stands before the king, and the king grants her wish, and he invites her in and says, what can I do for you? And she cleverly, and obviously because this is what God has shared with her, she says, it is my wish to hold a feast for you, the king. And again, with your permission, king, can we ask Haman to come? And so the king is very pleased. Haman is exceptionally pleased. He comes to the banquet, and the king says, Esther, what is it that you want? And Esther, in her wisdom, led and inspired by God, says, Your Majesty, if it pleases you, I will share tomorrow at another banquet what it is that my request is. And so Haman goes home. He's terribly pleased with himself that he has been invited to the banquet with Queen Esther. It quite goes to his head. He boasts to the family. He's still very cross about Mordecai, and the family give this advice: build a gallows and hang that terrible Mordecai on it. And Haman thinks, what a wonderful idea. In the meantime, that very evening, the king battles to sleep. He something is bothering him. And the long shot is that he goes through the annals and the records that have been kept, and he comes across that entry that I spoke about a couple of days ago, that Mordecai had thwarted a plot to kill the king. And the king remembers it, and he says, what happened to this man Mordecai? Has he ever been rewarded? And the courtiers say, no, he's never been rewarded. And the king is, well, we better do something. And the following morning, when Haman comes in, very pleased with himself, puffed up about how important he is, the king asks a rhetorical question without explaining what he's talking about. He says, how do I honor the man who has honored the king and saved his life? And Haman, he's so puffed up and proud, thinks the king's talking about him. So he thinks, well, what would I, Haman, like? A royal robe and the signet of the king, and to be paraded through the city as if I was number one in the land, or at least number two to the king. And the king, he's actually talking about Mordecai. Haman thinks he's talking about himself. And so that's exactly what happens. Now, the bottom line here is that when we pray and give God opportunity to speak to us, God gives us the solution, but God begins to work in the background. God worked by making Haman think he was so special, it went to his head, to his detriment. God began, to work in the background in the king to make him have a sleepless night and eventually discover that there was a man called Mordecai who had saved the king's life. And the king wants to do the right thing to Mordecai. And God brings all of this together to save the Jews. We'll pick up the story again tomorrow on Saturday's readings. God bless.